There is a room. You've lived in it for as long as you can remember. The walls are velvet, the floor polished wood. There is a stage, a script. You know your lines. You know when to smile, when to bow, when to bleed. You've performed so long, you've forgotten you were acting the applause reel. The audience faceless, and the light. You convinced yourself it was sunlight, but it came from above, not the sky. A spotlight. One night the silence stirs. You hear it, not a sound, but the absence of the usual noise. Behind the curtain, a breath, a presence, a whisper not meant for you. A sound that doesn't belong in your world, a script rustling not in your hands. You freeze. And in that stillness, a question begins to burn. Who wrote this play? We are born into roles: child, student, employee, friend, partner, citizen. But these are not identities. They are scripts, written by families, cultures, nations, ideologies, long before we ever had a say. And like good actors, we obey. We adjust. We smile. We shrink ourselves to fit into pre-written shapes. This is what Carl Jung called the persona, the social mask we wear to survive. But behind it, something watches, something we tried to forget. You look into the mirror backstage. It doesn't reflect you. It reflects the version of you others tolerate. Not too loud, not too quiet, not too strange, not too real. And yet your hands tremble. Something beneath the mask moves. A shadow. Jung warned us. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The script you follow, the roles you perform, they are not you. They are who you became, to be accepted, but at what cost? Imagine a forest outside this theater. Wild, silent, free. You've never walked in it. You've only watched it from behind red curtains, because here in the theater, it's safe. But safety is not life. Safety is sedation, Schopenhauer once said. Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world, and perhaps that's what this theater is. A prison made from comfort. A prison made from applause. Because when you perform the same script for long enough, even your suffering begins to feel like home. Then something shifts. The scene changes that wasn't in the script. Someone speaks when they shouldn't. You feel watched, not by the audience, but by something older, deeper. You glance past the curtain, and there it is, a figure, watching you. Not with judgment, not with love, just silence. You can't explain it, but you know. This figure is you, or was, or might be. The mind races. Who am I? When I stop performing, who would I be? If I walked off the stage, out of the theater, into the unknown? This is the beginning of Nietzsche's abyss, the place between illusion and self, where the roles fall away and nothing replaces them. And it terrifies you. Because in the herd, there is comfort. In the play, there is purpose. In the script, there is predictability. Step away is to step alone. Solitude, as Schopenhauer knew, is both a curse and a liberation. But what if the world beyond the theater isn't empty? What if it's the real stage? A stage not written by others, but shaped by will. Nietzsche called this becoming the Bermensch, the one who creates values rather than inherits them. To become such a person is to abandon the security of the known. To enter the void not as victim, but as author. You stop asking, what should I do? And begin asking, what do I will? Of course, there are voices that will beg you to stay. Voices of compromise. Voices of fear. Voices that say, be realistic. Don't overthink. This is just life. But these are not voices of truth. They are echoes. Echoes from others who never left the theater. Kierkegaard would say they live in despair, but not loud despair. A quiet despair, the kind that wears a smile. They've surrendered inwardness for approval, and they want you to stay where it's safe. Because if you walk out, they must confront the fact that they didn't. And yet, somewhere deep within, a stillness calls. It's not a command, not even a voice, just presence. Like Alan Watts said, the menu is not the meal. The map is not the territory. The self you think you are is not the one looking. You don't need to fight the manipulator. You don't even need to name them. You just need to become aware of the room, of the stage, of the illusion. And in that awareness, you stop dancing for applause. You stop smiling on cue. You stop obeying the script. And maybe, just maybe, you learn how to write your own, not with cruelty, not with coldness, but with clarity, with stillness, with truth. Because sometimes the most radical act of power is to step into the silence and no longer perform. The smile behind the blade there is a face. It enters your life quietly. No thunder, no threat. Just warmth, a softness you didn't know you needed, eyes that see through you, a voice that listens just right. It's not to reply, but to study. You don't notice it at first. You mistake the comfort for connection, the flattery for truth, the attention for love, but not all light is meant to illuminate. Some is designed to blind. In the ruins of your early silence, they begin weaving. Thread by thread, from your longings, your wounds, your hungers, you've never spoken aloud. Because that's where they live. In the unspoken, in the places you've never dared to name. They do not demand. They suggest. They do not conquer. They mirror. They shapeshift into the version of what you most crave. Friend, savior, lover, mentor, and you, desperate for meaning, open the door. But this is no guest. This is an architect. One who remodels your perception from within. They do not enter like a storm. They enter like a key. Suddenly, without ever asking, they are behind the wheel. Jung told us the persona is not who we are, but who we become for others. And the manipulator. They learn to control your mask because they know you fear removing it. The more you seek their validation, the tighter the chains grow. Chains made not of iron, but of identity. You begin to censor your truths. You laugh when you're unsure. You shrink when you want to speak. You become agreeable, predictable, malleable, and they smile because now they have you. It's not about your destruction. That's too obvious. It's about possession. It's about ownership of your internal weather. A subtle rearrangement of your values so that you begin to think their thoughts and call them your own. They rewrite your reality word by word until you forget your original script. And still, they never raise their voice. Because they know that manipulation works best, not through pressure, but through permission. You offer yourself willingly. They just hand you the stage. This is the paradox Kierkegaard spoke of. Despair disguised as devotion. You believe you've found someone who understands you. But really, you've found someone who understands your weakness better than you do. And still, you call it love. Still, you defend them. Because the truth would shatter the illusion, and the illusion is all you've built your world upon. You decorate the cell. Hang portraits on its walls. Call it safety. Call it destiny. Call it home. Because it's easier to live in a beautiful lie than to face the abyss of betrayal. Nietzsche saw this in the herd, the willingness to be led. If only the shepherd smiles sweetly enough. To be caged as long as the bars are made of gold. The manipulator doesn't hide. They don't need to. Because once they've molded your perception, they can walk freely through your mind. Unchallenged, unquestioned, trusted, that is their art, to become invisible, by becoming familiar. By the time you sense something is wrong, you doubt yourself, not them. They've already fed you just enough guilt to keep you tethered. It's just enough fear to keep you obedient. The more you try to resist, the more entangled you become, like a spider weaving from your own desires. They trap you without touching you. Schopenhauer said suffering is inescapable, but the worst kind of suffering is the one you participate in. Believing it's love, and still you tell yourself, this is what? Connection feels like this is just how people are. This is normal. Because to admit otherwise would mean you were fooled, used, controlled, and so you keep performing, keep nodding, you keep allowing, till one day a silence breaks through the noise. It comes not from them, but from within. A flicker, pause, a question. Who am I? When no one is watching. The mirror you've been gazing into begins to crack, and behind it, you glimpse a face, your own. Untouched, unperformed. And suddenly the smile you trusted feels like a blade. Not because it cut you loudly, but because it never had to. Because the worst prison is the one you build with your own hands. And the most dangerous liar is the one who tells you what you longed to hear. Not out of cruelty, but out of control. And you gave it freely because you were tired. because you were kind, because you were lonely. But now you are awake. And in that awakening, the power begins to shift, not with revenge, not with violence, but with clarity. Because when you stop needing their approval, their control begins to rot, and the spell is broken. The herd will feed you to the wolves. There is a hill. You stand upon it alone. Below, the crowd gathers, faceless, shifting, loud in the way only silence can be.
Oh.
You're not sure how you got here, only that at some point you stopped clapping when they did, stopped laughing on cue, stopped echoing what you didn't believe, and for that, you became a threat. They don't say it, they never say it, but they feel it, your stillness. You've deviated from the script, and now the whispering begins. First in corners, then in corridors. Eyes no longer meet yours with ease. Smiles turn into thin lines, and your name begins to rot in their mouths. Because the herd does not hate you for being wrong. It hates you for being different. This is the ancient tension Nietzsche wrote of, that the individual must struggle not just to live, but to remain themselves in a world where the tribe devours what it cannot categorize. The manipulator knows this. They count on it. They don't need to silence you directly. They just need to tilt the crowd 1 degree against you. A whisper here, a raised eyebrow there. They don't need to strike. They only need to point. And the herd will do the rest. This is not malice. It is machinery. Like wolves who turn on the wounded, the group senses disruption and responds with ritual violence. Not with fists, but with withdrawal, with exclusion. The quiet, crushing consensus that you are no longer one of them. In classrooms, this begins as laughter. In families, as concern. In workplaces, as isolation. Yes. And in every context, it feels like drowning in plain sight. You try to speak, but it's too late. Your voice sounds strange to them now, too sharp, too real. And so, you fall silent. Because you've learned that silence buys you time. That nodding buys you protection. That smiling buys you invisibility. You shrink, you adjust, you disappear, slowly. One compromise at a time. This is the slow death of inwardness that Kierkegaard warned of, the despair of forgetting oneself to survive being seen. The manipulator, meanwhile, watches from the center. Not exalted, not obvious, just safe. Just central enough to never seem dangerous. They blend into the crowd, even as they guide its attention like a conductor. They do not need power. They simply borrow yours. They twist group norms like vines around your ankles until your own guilt becomes the leash. Because nothing is more terrifying than exile, than being cast out of the warm illusion of belonging. And so the herd becomes the tool, the manipulator's buffer, their camouflage, their weapon. They manipulate systems, not just people. Because systems are more obedient. System will punish you without ever knowing why. This is the fog you now walk through. You question your own memory. Did I say too much? Was I too honest? Was I wrong? You begin to second-guess the very pulse of your instincts. The herd's silence feels like truth. Their absence feels like proof. And yet, somewhere, beneath the noise, beneath the shame, beneath the static of needing to be accepted, a deeper voice stirs. It does not shout, it does not defend. It simply waits. This is your original voice. The one that existed before you were taught to trade truth for approval. Schopenhauer knew that solitude, while painful, is the only honest mirror. And so, you step off the stage, you step into silence. Not the silence of fear, but of reclamation. You sit beneath the ruins of your former roles, and for the first time, you listen. The fog lifts, and there is no applause, no warmth, no reward, only space, only self. And that, as Alan Watts knew, is where the illusion begins to crack. Because in that space, you see that the need to belong was a cage. That compliance was not safety, it was submission, and the manipulator. They fade because their power was never in who they were, but in your fear of standing alone. Now, you stand at the edge of the crowd, not above them, not against them, but apart. You do not scream, you do not explain, you simply exist, unaligned. And that, in a world of copies, is a revolution. The mirror lies, but you keep staring. There is a mirror in a quiet room. It does not speak, it does not move, it simply reflects. But what it shows is not always the truth. You stand before it every morning. Straighten the collar, practice the smile, rehearse the words. You think this is you? But it's not. It's the echo. The performance, the persona, as Carl Jung called it, the mask, the face you show the world, refined through years of pleasing, surviving, adapting, but underneath, something ancient waits, silent, watching. This is the shadow. The part of you exiled when you were taught what good looked like, when anger was punished, when doubt was mocked, when your truth was too loud, too wild, too inconvenient, so you hid it, buried it, and forgot. But the shadow doesn't die. It lingers, not as a ghost, but as a mirror you can't quite look away from. And sometimes, someone comes along who knows exactly where that mirror is. A manipulator. They don't need to deceive you. They just need to reflect the parts of you you've hidden. Your secret hunger to be seen, your quiet terror of being alone, your deep unspoken belief that love must be earned. Painfully. They do not bind you. They offer you the chains, and you take them. Because they understand a truth most never admit. The most effective form of control is the one you place on yourself. They call you loyal. You call yourself patient. But maybe you're just afraid. Afraid that if you stop performing, you'll stop being loved. So you lie. Not to them, to yourself. Tell yourself they'll change. You tell yourself it's love. You tell yourself endurance is strength. But deep down, a quiet voice whispers, this is not you. Yet you silence it, because silence feels safer than truth. The manipulator doesn't need to gaslight you. You'll do it for them. You'll rewrite your memory to protect the illusion. You'll explain away the pain, the gut instinct, the sleepless nights, because the truth costs too much, and the mask is comfortable now. Alan Watts said the ego is a hallucination, a pattern of roles and expectations we confuse for identity. When you cling to it, you cling to suffering, to illusion. But when you let it go, you find something terrifying. The mirror shatters. And in the shards, you see not who you were taught to be, but who you are. This is where individuation begins, not by rising, but by descending. Jung called it the night sea journey. Plunge into the unconscious, into paradox. Into the parts of yourself you swore you'd never look at. The shadow is not evil. It is unlived life. And when it remains unseen, it governs you in secret. But when you face it, when you stop fearing your anger, your fear, your need, you take back the power you gave away. The manipulator loses their grip, because their grip was never on your throat. It was in your mind, your self-image, your story, your need to be the good one. But the good one suffers in silence. The good one forgives what should not be forgiven. The good one never asks, what do I want? Nietzsche warned us. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. But also, if you gaze long enough into the abyss gazes also into you. The manipulator is not always outside. Sometimes, it's the voice in your head, the one that says, you deserved it. Don't rock the boat. Better to be hurt than alone. But the truth, the abyss is not your enemy. It is your mirror, Allah. And once you stare long enough, not away, not around, but into, you stop fearing it. You stop fearing yourself. Kierkegaard spoke of despair, not as a feeling, but as a condition. A sickness of the self that arises when you are unwilling to be who you truly are. To heal is not to be happy, it is to be whole, to reclaim every forgotten fragment. To say, this is mine too, even the rage, even the fear, even the need. When you do this, the mask begins to crack, not with violence, but with light. You see that you are never broken, it's just hidden in the manipulator. They vanish, fade, lose interest, because their power was never real. It lived in your denial, your silence, your shame. Once you break the mirror, you stop playing the role, you stop repeating the script, you stop needing permission to walk away. You become, at last, your own. The art of subtle war, there's a fog that doesn't come from the sky, but from the mind. It rolls in slowly, not with thunder, but with kindness. Smile here, a compliment there, an offer you didn't ask for. You feel seen, heard, important, but something is off. You don't notice it at first. The way your words begin to change, the way you hesitate before expressing yourself, the way you replay conversations in your head, wondering if you were the one who misunderstood. This is not love. This is not care. This is strategy. It is the art of subtle war. Manipulation doesn't wear a villain's mask. It wears your reflection. Machiavelli never demanded cruelty. He demanded clarity. To see people not as saints, but as players. To understand power, not in explosions, but in currents. Manipulators don't raise their voice. They raise their influence. They know the terrain better than you, understand timing, perception, silence. They let you speak, but they listen for your fault lines. They remember the name you mentioned once, the dream you casually confessed. They store it, like weapons in a velvet box. It's a psychological chessboard, and every move is disguised as care. That compliment, a pawn, that apology, a knight, that shared vulnerability, a bishop in disguise. Every gesture looks sincere, but it's calculated. Because in their world, emotions are not feelings. They're tools. They provoke guilt to bind you. They create confusion to blind you. They know that once you begin to doubt your own senses, your memory, your instincts, your truth, you'll start reaching for theirs. And that is the moment they win. Not through domination, but through erosion. Nietzsche warned us of the herd. How most people would rather belong than be free. How they surrender their judgment for comfort. How they seek safety in consensus. But what if the herd is not a group? What if it's a mindset? The manipulator understands this. They offer you clarity, but only theirs. They offer you direction, but only their path. And if you stray, they don't punish, they disappoint. They retreat just enough to make you chase them, and you do. Not because you're weak, but because you were taught that love must be earned, that affection can be revoked, that your worth depends on another's approval. This is not just about power, it's about perception. Alan Watts once said, "The ego is not who you are, it's who you think you are." When you cling to it, you become a mirror for others to polish, smudge, or shatter. But when you see through it, you see the game. You see how the manipulator crafts fog from silence. How they never say the cruel thing, they imply it. They never demand submission. They frame it as love. It's not abuse. It's subtle. It's slow. It's almost elegant. But now you see the pattern. The favor that became an obligation, the gift that became guilt, kindness that became a leash. And when you see the pattern, you are no longer the pawn. You become something else. Not cruel, not cold. Conscious. Carl Jung spoke of individuation. The process of becoming whole. Not by being good, but by being real. And sometimes being real means acknowledging the war beneath the smile. The manipulation behind the compliment. The strategy beneath the silence. You stop reacting. You start observing. You do not raise your voice. You raise your awareness. You no longer explain yourself endlessly. You no longer chase approval like oxygen. You no longer confuse anxiety with intuition. See the game? And you refuse to play it. Kierkegaard called despair a sickness of the self, a refusal to be what one is. And that's what manipulation demands. That you abandon your center, your gut, your truth. But once you reclaim it, once you return to yourself, you become unplayable. You don't fight the manipulator with fire. You fight them with stillness. Like a mountain surrounded by fog, you let the mist swirl, but you remain unmoved. You do not engage in their false urgency. You do not react to their provocations. You see the bait and smile, because the war has already been won. Not when you destroy them, but when you no longer need to win. You are not heartless. You are not distant. You are aware. And in that awareness, there is peace. There is power. There is you. The cost of being nice, there is a house at the edge of the forest. Small, quiet, gentle, built on the hope that if it is humble enough, no wolves will come. And for a while it works. You smile, you nod. You agree? You offer your time, your energy, your boundaries, like flowers at a stranger's doorstep, hoping they will return the gesture with care, but they don't. Because niceness is not protection. It is perfume on fear. We are taught from childhood. Be polite. Be agreeable. Don't make people uncomfortable. We learn to flinch before we speak. To dress our no in a dozen apologies. To to let others interrupt us, diminish us, bend us. And we call it kindness, but it's not. It's surrender. Schopenhauer knew, the world does not reward innocence. It consumes it. He said suffering is woven into the fabric of existence, and those who walk through life wide and compliant are not spared but devoured. Manipulators know this. They smell your hesitation like blood in water. They do not pounce. They smile. They ask for small favors, ones that feel rude to deny. They compliment you just enough to make you doubt your instincts. They wait, and they push. A boundary crossed once, then again. A request becomes a demand. Favor becomes an obligation. And when you finally resist, they tilt their head and say, "But you've always said yes before." Your silence becomes permission. Your tolerance, an invitation. Your niceness, a leash. And still, you hesitate. Because the idea of being disliked feels worse than being used. This is not virtue.
Yes.
It's fear dressed in manners. Fear of confrontation, fear of being the bad one, fear of standing alone. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to fit into society, to be liked, accepted, welcomed. But a mask worn too long becomes your face. And under it, your true self suffocates, because there's a voice within you, quiet, ancient, firm, that says, No, I don't owe you access to my time. No, I don't have to agree to be good. No, I will not abandon myself so that you can be comfortable. Its voice is not rude. It is not cruel. It is conscious. Kierkegaard wrote that despair is not merely sorrow. It is the refusal to be oneself. And every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you swallow discomfort to protect another's ego, you despair. You disappear. Not all at once, but slowly, till you wake up one day smiling on the outside and hollow on the inside. That's the cost of being nice. You become a ghost in your own life. Nietzsche urged us to step beyond the herd, to rise above the instinct to please, to become the Bermensch, the one who creates their own values, who speaks from the core, not from the crowd. But first, you must enter the forest, not the one outside, the one within, the forest of fear, of being disliked. Misunderstood, alone, that is where the wolves live. But that is also where the wild parts of you wake up. The part that knows kindness is not submission. It's discernment. It's saying, I choose to give. But not because I'm afraid, Alan Watts reminded us. The ego is not who we are, but who we think we must be. The pleasing one, the peaceful one, the one who never offends. But when you drop that illusion, there is stillness, not silence. Stillness. The kind that cannot be manipulated. The kind that sees through the smile and says, I see you, and I see me more clearly. And that is the turning point. When you stop asking, will they still like me? And start asking, will I still like? Myself, it is not about becoming harsh. It is about becoming whole. You are allowed to speak without apology. You are allowed to protect your energy. You are allowed to say no without guilt. And if they walk away, let them. Because the only thing worse than being disliked by others is being abandoned by yourself. So burn the mask. Reclaim your voice. Rebuild the house, not at the edge of the forest, but deep inside it, where kindness is not a strategy, but a choice, where you are not merely nice, you are true. How to manipulate back. Without becoming them, there is a room, not made of walls, but of mirrors. Each one bending light, bending truth. Some reflect who you think you are, others who they want you to be. You step inside. Suddenly it's hard to tell what's real and what's refracted. This is the world of manipulation, a hall of illusions, a silent theater. And for most of your life, you were the audience. Clapping at gestures, believing the mask was the face, applauding the lie because it wore a gentle voice. But now you see it. You see the strings. You see the script. Out. And something inside you whispers, what now? There is a fear in waking up, not of the manipulators, but of yourself. Because once you know how the game works, there's a temptation to play it too, to wear masks more convincingly, to wound with the same weapons that once broke you. But that is not strength. That is surrender. To mirror their coldness is not power. It is infection. The task, then, is to become strategic without becoming soulless. To descend into the abyss and return still whole. Kierkegaard spoke of this descent, the leap of faith, not into belief, but into inwardness. To know the void and still choose yourself, Carl Jung said. The shadow must be faced, not to become it, but to integrate it. To walk through the darkness and emerge with clarity, not cruelty. So what does it mean to manipulate back without becoming them? It means you learn the game, not to play it, but to stop being played. You learn their tactics, not to control others, but to protect the sanctity of your own mind. You become an editor of your script, not a puppet in theirs. And yes, you become precise. You observe from a higher perch, not detached, but discerning. You hear their compliments and measure the intent behind the tone. You feel their guilt trips, but anchor yourself in silence. You say no with calm. You set boundaries with steel. You don't retaliate. You reposition. You don't fight for approval. You walk away. This is not manipulation. It is awareness. It is not deception. It is discernment. Alan Watts said that the ego thrives on control, on illusion, on the desperate need to manage appearances. But when you let go of that, you gain a new kind of vision. Stillness sharpens perception. And from that stillness, you act. Not in haste, not in reaction, but in precision. A manipulator shouts with their silences. You answer with your presence. They sow confusion. You stay rooted. They push because they expect you to bend. But now you don't bend. You don't break. You simply don't move, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote. Whoever fights monsters must take care not to become one. And if you gaze too long into the abyss will gaze back into you. But what if you don't flinch? What if instead of becoming it, you understand it? What if you face the monster and say, I see you, but I am not you? Then you gain something even the manipulators never had. Selfhood. Power with soul. Clarity with compassion. Boundaries without bitterness. This is individuation, the path Jung spoke of. It's become whole. Not pure, not perfect, but true. It is not about pretending you're above the game. It's knowing you're no longer trapped in it, because now you can watch it all unfold. The smiles, the insinuations, the subtle tests. And instead of reacting, you respond. Instead of pleasing, you pause. Instead of rushing to be understood, you simply understand. There is power in that pause. There is silence that says more than words ever could. And in that stillness, you remember who you were before the games began. Not the frightened child seeking peace through obedience. Not the masked adult performing for acceptance. But the one beneath it all, who sees clearly, feels deeply, and chooses wisely. You no longer need to fight fire with fire. You've become water. Unshakable, calm/precise. And in this world of mirrors, you are the one who finally sees. Silence is power. There is a stage, lit by fragile light. The actors move in loops, saying the same lines, pulling the same strings. A play, not for truth, but for control. And for a while, you were in it, reciting your lines, reacting on cue, performing the role they wrote for you, the agreeable one, the quiet one, the one who stays, but then something breaks, or perhaps something awakens. You begin to feel the hollowness in your words. It's the weight of a mask that no longer fits. You watch them closely and realize they're not speaking to you, but to a version of you they believe they control. Try to argue, to explain, to prove you're more than that. But they don't hear. They don't want to, because control does not listen. It scripts, it edits, it confines. And that is when it happens. The final move. Not a scream, not a fight. Not a perfectly crafted retaliation, but silence. A slow, sovereign turning of your back on the stage itself. Schopenhauer once said, "To be alone is the fate of all great minds." But this is not loneliness. It is liberation, because you see it now. You don't need to win their game. You only need to stop playing, Alan Watts said. The more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. Manipulators seek permanence, fixed responses, predictable obedience, a frozen version of you. But you are not stone. You are fire. They cannot read what does not stay still. They cannot trap what does not cling. Your silence becomes your sword, your distance, your shield. You do not explain. You do not justify. You do not dance for approval. And in doing so, you become unreadable, untouchable. This is not apathy. It is clarity. This is not revenge. It is freedom. You no longer need them to see your worth for it to exist. You no longer fear their absence because you've come home to your own presence. That terrifies them. Because they no longer know where your buttons are, because the puppet has left the stage. Carl Jung called this the path of individuation. The painful, powerful shedding of all that is not truly you. The persona drops. The shadow is faced. And the soul steps forward, naked, clear, unwilling to play the old games. Nietzsche called it becoming the Bermensch, not a tyrant, but a creator. One who writes their own myth instead of repeating inherited lies. One who walks away from the herd, into the wild, into the fog, into the terrifying joy of self-authorship. There is a scene. A person stands at the edge of a cliff. The world behind them burns with noise, accusations, projections, manipulations, but ahead is quiet. A void, but not empty. Alive, still, but not stagnant. Like deep water, calm on the surface, infinite below. And they step forward, not with fury, but with faith. Kierkegaard called it the paradox of inwardness. To leave the crowd, the safety, the false gods, and trust something you cannot name. Your silence now is not a lack of words, but the presence of truth. It is not about being passive. It is about being whole. No need to convince. No need to defend. No need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. Silence is not retreat. It is transcendence. A quiet revolt against the tyranny of reaction, a sacred refusal to be baited. The game cannot go on without your role. The mask slips from your hand. The audience fades. The lights go dark, not away from them, but toward yourself. You do not hate them. You simply no longer belong to their illusion. This is the final move. Not a blow, but a disappearance. It's not absence, but arrival. You don't leave to punish them. You leave to protect what was forgotten inside you. Because for the first time, you are no longer a character in their story. You are the author of your own.